Is guilt very common when you're grieving? I ask because I know somebody who lost his elderly mother a couple of years ago, and he said to me quite recently, I still think, should I have done more? Should I have visited her more? And it's kind of going round and round in his head. How would you advise somebody like that who's feeling guilty?
Can I just check in with the word loss? Because it's the word we use. We use many words around death, like loss, passed away, passed over. And his mum, he didn't lose his mum, she died. So I much prefer using the terms that help us face the reality of it, because everything that we do to deny the reality of it keeps us a little bit stuck.
That's really interesting, because I always felt
it's a bit too brutal.
As a journalist and a presenter, yeah, that it's a bit too frank to say, oh, because his mum died or she's dead, that it just sounds a bit tactless. But
it's not
for you,
it's true.
You just got to face reality. That's really
and she
interesting.
died.
And so how can he deal with that guilt?
So, you know, guilt is the most painful companion of grief, and it's universal. And it's more complicated depending on the relationship. But I think his aspect of it is all the what ifs. It's now that she's died, there's no more opportunities to go back and visit her. There's no more opportunities to have those conversations, to tell her he loves her or resolve difficulties. So there's that constant kind of hitting up against a brick wall of, well, if I had, would I feel better? If I had, would she be better? If I had done more, would she have survived? And I think, again, part of our 21st century is that we have to face the reality that people die and recognise the limits of our power and the limits of our potency. So when somebody walks through a hospital door, they somehow think medicine, science, intensive care units are going to take over, and the doctors are failing when someone dies, or they'll push for their elderly mother of 95 to have every possible treatment, which actually might just increase her suffering, when actually to go home and die at home, at the peace of home with people she loved, her in a familiar place with familiar smiles and love, is far better. But we find it very, very difficult not to chuck everything we can against this sort of monster death. And, you know, it is as much part of life as birth. And the more we find ways of talking about death with our parents and our partners and our siblings and our children before we die, the less guilt we have, the less regret we have, and the more opportunities we have to actually have the kind of death that will be peaceful and painless.
So really for him, he just needs to accept that there's nothing he can do now and let it go.
He was powerless. He couldn't stop his mum dying. It was the natural order of things. And there's a kind of magical thinking with love and death, is that if I loved them enough, that love would keep them alive. So somehow I haven't loved them enough, I failed them. And we need to separate the feeling from the fact. He really loved her and he was powerless, and the two don't get conflated.